Hi guys, and welcome back to the Racer's Edge. So it may only be a Thursday, but that hasn't stopped us from getting a sneak peek at some of the upgrades Ferrari have brought for this weekend's Spanish Grand Prix. And the sneak peek we've gotten a very good look at is the new rear wing specification for this particular event. Now, as we know, for the season thus far, Ferrari have stuck mainly to the launch spec specification of rear wing. That was up until the 7th round at Monaco, where they introduced their first brand new rear wing, which was a high downforce ring specifically for that event. Now, of course, accelerate this to a couple of rounds later, and we now have a second brand new rear wing in the last 3 events. And alongside this, the specification of rear wing is being used in tandem with the beam ring that they introduced last time out in Canada, which also is a medium downforce specification. So what also I am finding from this, as we've seen a lot of the rear wings up and down the grid so far installed on all the cars, is that Ferrari are on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to the downforce levels that the rear wing they've installed. A lot of the teams have gone for a high drag downforce specification, whereas Ferrari have gone for a little bit less downforce and maybe a bit more top speed. Now, I can look at this, and you can as well, in a number of different directions. It means they're very confident in the downforce levels and load that they can produce with this rear wing for this event, and they're very confident in that. Or they feel they have a little bit of a weakness when it comes to straight line speed up against the likes of Red Bull, and they're wanting to offset that for race conditions. Now let's actually take a look at this brand new rear wing for the event and then put it alongside all the other rear wings that they've had and make comparisons. Now there's a really interesting shot or interesting image that Formula Data Analysis over on Twitter created of all the specifications of rear wing that Ferrari have used this season thus far. And there are noticeable changes to those, of course. Now what's interesting with these 3 specifications of rear wings is the subtleties with them all. And of course we can see that quite clearly from the image. For this particular event and this racetrack in itself, it requires a certain downforce level, and so Ferrari couldn't run the medium downforce level because it didn't offer enough downforce in the high speed sections of the track, and they would lose out in the corners through them. And of course the Monaco specification is far too draggy on the straight, and it just, in a race situation where you're trying to overtake, it would be a nightmare for the teams, even with DRS, I would suspect. And so they brought a medium range rear wing in terms of the spectrum of the 3 rings that they've had thus far this season. And it's a middle ground. It provides just enough downforce for all the corners, so you're making sure you're not losing out in them. And of course, it's not as draggy as, say, the Monaco spec rear wing would have been. And of course, all of this would have been calculated in the simulation tools and in the setup work that they've done in the sim over the last week. And of course, this isn't something special or out of the ordinary. This is a specification of rear wing you generally would want to introduce for a number of different tracks and downforce levels in the season. But it is going to be interesting to see how they stack up against the likes of Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, because they are running slightly different configurations of rear wings, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. Some of those teams are running a bit more of a draggy rear wing, which is of course a much more thickened main plane, which will of course increase the drag on the car, while other teams in that list have got kind of the same specification of rear wing drag levels that Ferrari has. So it seems it's a balancing act between what the teams are looking to get out of their packages respectively. And I think as the weekend progresses, it's going to be a case of the finest of details are going to have a huge impact on qualifying, but of course, more importantly than that, the race situation. And there's another caveat to throw into all of this, and that is of course that there's a huge potential for rain to fall during the race, which would be the first time since 1996 that the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona has had a wet race. And for any of you that weren't around, that was quite the eventful race. Only 6 drivers finished that particular race, with Michael Schumacher winning that by a 45-second margin over the second place. So if that's anything to go by, we could be in for a blockbuster of a race. So yeah, that's the video, guys. There is going to be a much more in-depth one once we get a look at the floor and all the other kind of bodywork changes that they've introduced with this upgrade package for the event. That will be tomorrow, sometime about midday-ish, I would suspect, once we've gotten the cars in the pit lane. Right guys, that's the video. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, leave a like. If you're new and have found the video, subscribe and turn on notifications. And I will see you all tomorrow in a new video.